Why do people find it so hard to change? And specifically, why do people find it so hard to change when their higher self seeks perfection?
Well, first of all, the idea of the higher self seeking perfection is actually incorrect, if you're asking me. The higher self seeks experience. The higher self is God. This is why in the Vedas, the Hindu scriptures, you see many times Brahman, God, is Atman, soul. Atman is Brahman. So you'll see in the Vedas that are saying God is soul and soul is God. There is no separation between the two of them, which my experience of that is a lot, and I can tell you it's true, at least from my own experience. So the higher self is not seeking perfection, and neither is God, for a simple reason. Perfection doesn't move. How do you improve on perfection? See, everything we do in life we can improve on. I can be a better husband to my wife. I can be a better father to my kids. I can always improve my technique in weightlifting. I can become a better artist. I can become a better therapist. I can become a better gardener. And we do that for our own self-pleasure, for our own self-esteem, to just experience what we're capable of. As an athlete, I always wanted to improve myself just to see what I could do, not because I was trying to seek some perfection ideal. But the key point is perfection does not move. So in Buddhism, there's the principle of dukkha, which means necessary imbalance, because if God, shall we say, centered itself in perfection, there would be no way God could have an experience, because there would be nothing for God to do. So metaphorically speaking, or allegorically speaking, God induces imperfection to allow movement. If you balance a bat perfectly on its end, it'll be there forever. But if you induce vibration, the bat might start to fall, and now you have movement. And you can't have consciousness of anything without movement. There's three prerequisites to consciousness: space, time, and movement. For something you to be conscious of something, you at least have mental space. You have to have time, because to observe something takes time, and movement and time are related together. If nothing moves, and if there was nothing moving in the universe, you would have no way to have the concept of time. So the question is, why is it so hard to change, isn't it? The reason it's so hard to change is because we learn things in the beginning of our life, and we all have a unique personality, and we learn things throughout our life. But when we're learning things as children, until we're around between 6 and 7 years old, we don't really have a sense of ego. We don't have enough capacity for abstract thought and discernment to know whether or not what mom and dad or anyone else is telling us is true or not, because we have no way to compare it to any other thing. First time someone tells you that 2 plus 2 is 4, how would you evaluate whether or not that was true or not without having a lot of mathematical skills? And believe me, to prove that 2 plus 2 was not 4, you would have to have a lot of mathematical skills. It would take a Cantor or a Kurt Gödel or someone. And Kurt Gödel did use his theorem to show that mathematical equations are not as reliable as people think they are. But so there you go. So the point I'm making is that we all get imprinted with these ideas and these beliefs about ourselves. And those ideas, because the older we get, the longer these ideas have been in play, the more efficient they get in developing pathways in the nervous system. And physiologically speaking, that is described as the law of facilitation, that says when an impulse passes once through a given set of neurons to the exclusion of others, it tends to do so on a future occasion, and each time it traverses this path, the resistance will be smaller. So the first time someone teaches you to tie a shoe, you don't have a neural network to support it, so it's quite hard, and you have to really think about it. You got to memorize it. But each time you do it, the neural pathways start to connect with each other, and a network forms. And then every single time you tie your shoe for the rest of your life, an impulse is passing through a given set of neurons to the exclusion of others, and each time it traverses this path, the resistance will be smaller. So then you come along and say, okay, we'll say someone's got the habit of picking their nose in front of other people, like kids often do. And the mom and dad say, hey, don't do that in public. That's dirty. You should do that in the bathroom, and you should wipe it on Kleenex, not on the kitchen table or on your pants. But the kid's already been picking their nose for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it is. So the child then has to really learn to think about that. But this reflexive instinctual habit, because the body feels the irritation of the nose, so the biology wants to remove it. And so the child now has to bring that instinctual awareness into cognitive awareness and try to change the behavior. But because the instinctual pathway is so well developed, it takes a lot of focus to override the inertia of the facilitated pathway. So one of the reasons people have a hard time making changes in their life is because change takes a lot of energy. You have to override the inertia of whatever it is that you're trying to change and the facilitation of the pathway, because it's a lot easier to do what you've been doing for a long time, whether it's the right thing to do or not. This is why it's so important to have a specific dream, goal, or objective that you're trying to achieve, because if someone's trying to get you to change your diet, but you don't really have any reason that you're inspired or motivated to change your diet, you're not going to change your diet, because you have to have a source of levity to help you overcome the gravity or the inertia of that belief or behavior or thought process. So if you really have a dream of changing, say, the shape of your body, which requires the changing of your diet, then every time you reach for something that your therapist or life coach or nutritionist tells you is contradictory to achieving your body shape, then you look at the food, for example, and you say, okay, that's going to add weight to my body, or that's going to inflame my body, and you consciously focus on your dream, and you visualize yourself looking like and feeling like the person you're choosing to be, and you're literally creating that person in your mind, and the more time you put energy into it, the more that body of your own creation attracts energy and becomes real and begins to have an attractive force that draws you forward, almost like a fish chasing after a lure. So you start actually building this idea or this concept of yourself in your mental body, which is also then emotionalized because you're focusing on your dream. So you now have a copy of it in your astral body, and the mental and the astral are pouring down into the etheric and the physical bodies. So what happens is when you're emotionalizing the dream and seeing yourself as this person and making dream affirmative choices, then the dream's giving you the levity to overcome the gravity and the inertia that's set up inside the body through habits, inside the biochemistry through chemical pathways, inside the unconscious through unconscious habitual repetition of prior eating behaviors in this case. So the point I'm making is that it takes a lot of energy to make change because you have to override all these facilitated pathways, and also a lot of people fear change because they're not sure what's going to happen if they change. For example, if someone was sexually abused and they're unconsciously carrying a lot of weight to protect them from the fear of sexual interaction by making themselves unattractive, but say they go to the doctor for a checkup and the doctor says, look, you have high blood pressure and you're pre-diabetic and you really need to lose some weight because you're right on the edge of a disease here. Now that might be enough of a goal to scare somebody into managing their behaviors and exercising and doing whatever it is that they need to do, but that's what's called a negative goal. So some people respond better to negative goal setting than they do to positive. I get patients coming to me regularly with those types of diagnoses, but I say, look, why don't we work toward a positive orientation unless you feel more motivated by the threat of a disease and being disabled. Would you rather focus on having a beautiful body and really loving yourself and being proud of yourself for recreating the shape of your body into something that is appealing to you? And if the answer is yes, then we can use that positive dream to give them the levity and to teach them how to manage their mind and their beliefs and their behaviors accordingly. But they still have to do the work. And this is why a lot of people don't do good with the change process without a coach or a therapist to help hold them accountable. So the answer to your question, if it's not clear already, is that there's a lot of inertia to change, and there's also a lot of unconscious programming most often involved in the change process, and the unconscious is much more powerful than the conscious mind. Bruce Lipton says the unconscious has about 1 million times more processing power than the conscious mind. So if you don't have a dream or a goal that you can really feel inspired about and get emotional about in a positive way, then you're not going to have the energy to influence the restructuring of the neural networks to support the new behavior, and change becomes very, very hard. And a lot of what people are trying to change is hard because it's linked to some kind of an addiction to coffee, an addiction to sex, an addiction to pornography, an addiction to alcohol, an addiction to exercise, an addiction to work. But all addictions really are attempts at safe love. So often it's hard to change because the addiction that a person's trying to change out of is actually what gives them a sense of love and connection without fear of judgment, pain, or some kind of negative backlash. Think of all the people that are addicted to porn that may have had some kind of painful experience happen with intimacy, where maybe they were criticized as they weren't good enough in bed, or they don't smell good, or their sex organs aren't big enough or beautiful enough, or it only takes one of those to really hurt somebody. And then so the porn becomes very safe because they can bring themselves to pleasure and not have to deal with any criticism or challenges to their self-esteem. So if all of a sudden someone's trying to get you out of a porn addiction by just telling you it's bad and you shouldn't do it and it's sinful or whatever, they're not really looking at the reason why you are attracted to porn in the first place. And so now what you're trying to do is you're trying to use some kind of form of leverage or force or guilt or shame, which only just adds another wound. And so the person now looks for another way to get safe love, and so they might stop the pornography but become an alcoholic. So classically, what you see when you're working with change issues, if there's an addiction involved, if you don't get to the root of it, then to succumb to the force of whoever's implementing the change, be it your doctor, your parents, or your spouse, for example, then people will make the change, but they haven't actually dealt with the crisis. Therefore, they need a neurosis, an adaptive crisis, to alleviate the stress caused by the actual issue that's driving the need for safe love. And so they stop eating or stop doing pornography, but then they become a workaholic or an exercise fanatic or a religious fanatic, and they just move the energy out another hole, so to speak. So those are some of the reasons why it's hard to change.